Hi, this is the Bible story of Joseph, from prison to prime minister. Poor Joseph, the son of Israel, now marched away from being in charge of Potiphar's estate to the prison of the Pharaoh of Egypt. And he hadn't done anything wrong. He was framed by Potiphar's wife. Now, this was a special prison where only the enemies of the king or enemies of other high-ranking officials were kept, like Potiphar. Some of the prisoners had to stay in this prison for the rest of their lives. Some of them stayed there until the king pronounced them guilty and they were hung or had their heads chopped off or maybe fed to the crocodiles in the Nile. But a few were found not guilty and were set free. It was not little jail cells with bars like our prisons. From the story in the Bible, it sounds like it was a big walled courtyard with space in the middle, and the prisoners could go in and out of their little huts. More like a walled village, and certainly not a big building with little rooms and iron bars. Why was Joseph taken to prison? His old master, Potiphar, the captain of the king's guard, had believed his lying wife when she said Joseph had tried to attack her in her bedroom. So Potiphar had sent Joseph to this special prison. I imagine it was an awful prison. There was trash and sewage and vomit all over the grounds and piled up against the prison walls. The stinking garbage often made the prisoners so sick they died before they could be hung or fed to the crocodiles. The food was horrible, and many prisoners got diseases by eating nothing but rotten mush and moldy bread every day, and drinking dirty water with scum on the top. No wonder they threw up. Some of the very bad prisoners might be chained to the walls, where their shackles made them bleed and get infected. Sick and starving prisoners would howl with pain and hunger every day and night and drive the prison warden crazy. So the warden just locked them in and went home where it was quiet. That's why the prison warden was surprised when a young, handsome, new prisoner was brought to him. It was Joseph. He was clean and polite and didn't use bad language. He didn't even complain about being sent to prison. Joseph's guards told the warden, "This Joseph is a wonder. He will make this prison a different place, if you give him a chance." They had seen Joseph work for Potiphar, and they knew. The warden looked Joseph over and asked, "So, what would you do in this prison if I gave you a chance, kid?" His laugh was ugly. Joseph looked around. "Well, sir, first I would clean up all this mess. In fact, I would have the other prisoners help me. I'm sure they are bored to death being locked in with nothing to do. They might welcome a little exercise and would certainly be glad if the place didn't stink so much." "You're totally crazy, man, if you think a single one of these lazy criminals would do any kind of work around here. You're stupid, too. Here's your ration of bread. Just stay out of my way." Still laughing, the warden locked the door and went home. Joseph walked over to a man who was obviously sick with a fever. He washed the man's body with the scummy but cool water and even gave the sick man his own ration of bread. The other prisoners watched and asked, "What you doing helping that old man? He's just going to die by morning." Joseph looked up with kindness in his eyes. "He might die, but he deserves to die in as much comfort as I can give him. He's a human being, just like we are." The rest of the prisoners stared with their mouths open, and some laughed. They were always beating each other up, complaining, swearing, and never sharing anything. They didn't care about each other at all. This new prisoner had a screw loose. The next day, the prisoners watched in disbelief as Joseph started to push the trash into a big pile at one end of the prison. Joseph smiled to one of the men. "I'll bet you're bored and uncomfortable. How about helping me shove this garbage away so it'll smell better in here?" The man replied, "Are you out of your mind?" But after watching Joseph for half an hour, the man got up from the ground and started to help. Joseph praised and thanked him. Pretty soon, a few other men got up and started to help as well. The warden couldn't believe it when he came to bring the daily bread and dirty water.
"What the blankety blank has been going on in here?"
he demanded. Joseph answered politely, "Sir, we thought we might feel better in a cleaner prison. And, sir, we would be very grateful if you would bring us some clean water. The men would be stronger if they weren't sick." The warden shrugged, his face astonished.
"What do I care if they're sick?"
Joseph replied, "If they were well, you could probably get them to do some work around here." The warden furrowed his brows.
"They'll never work."
Then he paused.
"What kind of work?"
Joseph answered intelligently, "I'll bet you that if the men felt stronger, they would be willing to grow vegetables in that weedy center court of the prison. They would become much more strong and cheerful, and they might even grow enough vegetables that you could sell the excess and keep the money yourself. You probably don't get paid enough for being a prison warden, do you?" The warden's jaw dropped open again. You see, Joseph was smart. He knew the warden would love to get more money. Who wouldn't? Joseph talked the other prisoners into cooperating so they could get out into the fresh air every day and eat better food than bread and water. It didn't take the warden long to see that Joseph was slowly but surely leading the others to make the prison a much better place. Cleaner, more comfortable, almost cheery, but not quite. It was so much better, in fact, the warden started staying at his office rooms overnight, giving the prisoners a little better food and cleaner water, and following Joseph's suggestions of letting them make straw mattresses to sleep on instead of the hard ground. All the prisoners loved what Joseph was doing. They didn't want to be there, but they gladly obeyed Joseph and worked by his side. Just as it was with his first master, Potiphar, the prison warden began to trust Joseph more and more. One day he called Joseph and said,
"You know, Joseph, because you're always honest and never ever try to escape, I'm impressed with you. The most amazing thing is that you always do more and better than you have to do. Those guards of Potiphar, they were right."
Joseph bowed at the waist and said,
"Thank you, sir. Work is far better than being bored. And my God says that I must be honest and kind in all things."
The warden nodded slowly.
"Joseph, I like your plans around here. I think I'm going to put you in charge of the whole prison. I know you will do an honorable job."
Joseph bowed again, grateful that he now had the authority to do even more and better than he'd done before. And he did. The prison became almost comfortable. The men didn't worry that any day one of them might be executed. Sometime later, the prison gate was unlocked and 2 new men were thrown into the prison. They both looked wealthy in fine clothes, but they were shaking with terror. One was bawling and screaming, "I'm innocent! I'm innocent!" A guard kicked the man backward and shouted, "So one of you tried to poison Pharaoh, huh? You can be sure we will find out which one of you it was, and then you're dead meat." They slammed the gate, locked it, and marched away. Joseph questioned the men, finding out that one of the men was Pharaoh's own butler, who served him wine at every meal. The other was the Pharaoh's baker, who made Pharaoh's favorite fluffy white bread. Apparently, after Pharaoh's last meal of bread and wine, he got violently sick and almost died. It had to be from poison given either by the butler or the baker, so both of them were thrown into prison while Pharaoh's detectives investigated. Yes, they even had detectives back then. Any king without detectives would be pretty stupid and pretty dead. One day, both the butler and the baker woke up very troubled and upset. Joseph asked them what was the matter. The butler spoke first.
"Last night I had a strange dream. I have no idea what it meant, except that it was important. I wish I knew what it meant."
Joseph said,
"God can tell me what dreams mean. Tell me about it."
The butler said,
"In my dream I saw a grapevine in front of me. It had 3 branches, blossoming and then grew into big, ripe grapes. I was holding Pharaoh's cup, so I took the grapes and squeezed the juice into the cup. Then I gave the cup to Pharaoh."
Joseph prayed in his heart to know the meaning, and the Lord put it into his mind. Joseph said,
"The 3 branches are 3 days. Your dream means that within 3 days, Pharaoh will take you out of prison and give you back your job as his butler. Then you will serve Pharaoh's wine just as you have before. But I ask you one favor. When you go back to Pharaoh's palace, kindly remember me. Tell Pharaoh what I did for you, so he will get me out of this prison. You see, I was stolen out of my own land and sold here as a slave. I have done nothing wrong to be cast into this prison."
The chief baker listened to all of this, which sounded so good it gave him hope. So he asked, "Please tell me the meaning of my dream, too. In my dream, I had 3 baskets balanced on my head. The top basket had all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh. But as I walked, birds flew down and ate all of the baked goods out of the basket. They knocked it right off my head. What could my dream mean?" Joseph looked troubled as the Lord told his mind what the baker's dream meant. But he had to tell the man the truth.
"The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will cut off your head and hang your body on a tree. The birds will eat the flesh off your bones."
It was a terrible prophecy. Joseph wondered if Pharaoh had discovered it was the chief baker who poisoned him. All night long, the chief baker cried and moaned in fear. Who wouldn't have? 3 days later was Pharaoh's birthday. To celebrate, he made a great feast for all his servants. Just as the Lord had told Joseph, the chief butler was restored to his job, but the chief baker was hung on a tree and beheaded. Unfortunately, the chief butler forgot all about Joseph in the prison and didn't say anything to Pharaoh about Joseph. 2 long years passed, with Joseph still in prison. But one night, Pharaoh had an awful dream. In it, he stood by the Nile River. But as he watched, 7 good, fat, healthy cows came up out of the river and went to graze in a green meadow. But almost immediately, 7 more cows came out of the river. But they were scrawny, ugly, and diseased. They stumbled forward to the healthy cows and ate them up. Pharaoh woke up sweating in a panic. What could such a weird dream mean? It wasn't an ordinary nightmare like people often have. It was strong and stuck in his head like an iron sword. He finally got back to sleep, only to have another distressing dream. A big field of grain grew up straight and strong. 7 full and healthy ears of wheat grew from the top, which was lots more than any stalk of grain ever produced in real life. Then, right away, a skinny, twisted bunch of grain grew up next to the good one. It had scrawny ears of wheat at the top. But a hot east wind blew on the grain and withered it. But even though the skinny grain was dried up, it turned on the good plump grain and ate it up. Whoa! Weirder and weirder. In his sleep, Pharaoh cried out in fear and woke himself up. He was so troubled by his 2 dreams, he called all the magicians and wise men in Egypt to tell him what the dreams meant. All of them shrugged and just looked at each other and dared not say a word in case they guessed wrong. Suddenly, the chief butler dropped to his knees and spoke.
"Oh, mighty Pharaoh, I suddenly remember my sins. When the chief baker and I were thrown in prison, we both had strange dreams. A young man was there, a Hebrew, who told us the meaning of our dreams, and all that he said came true exactly. I was restored to my place as your butler, and the baker was hanged and beheaded."
Pharaoh listened and demanded, "Bring him to me right away." By this time, Joseph had been in prison 17 years. He was now 30 years old. Pharaoh's guards quickly went and brought Joseph out of jail, but they couldn't present him to Pharaoh, all dirty, with long, scraggly hair and a beard. So at triple speed, they bathed him, shaved him, and gave him a clean linen kilt and a plain headdress. They rushed him before Pharaoh's throne and pushed him to his knees. Pharaoh immediately told Joseph of his dreams and asked Joseph to interpret it. Joseph answered, low and smooth,
I cannot interpret it, your majesty, but my God can, and his answer will give you peace. This is what your dreams mean. And both dreams mean the same thing. The 7 beautiful fat cows are 7 good years in Egypt. The 7 healthy ears of grain are the same 7 good years. The 7 skinny cows and the 7 shriveled ears of grain are both 7 years of famine in Egypt. The dreams are God telling you, the king of Egypt, what he is going to do in the next 14 years, so you can prepare your country. First, there will be 7 years of plenty of meat and milk, plenty of grain for bread. But then will come a terrible famine throughout all the land of Egypt. It will be so bad, no one will even remember the 7 good years. The 2 dreams are proof that God really means to do this, and it will happen soon. Pharaoh looked joyful and worried at the same time. It's true. I can feel the truth in the words you say, but what shall I do? He seemed to ask the whole room at once, but nobody had an answer except Joseph, who was still being directed by the Spirit of the Lord. Your Majesty, you must find the most wise man you know and set him over the food through all of Egypt. Then let that man choose officers everywhere in the land who will take up and store 1/5 of the cattle and the grain during the years of plenty. All this food will belong to you, Pharaoh, to store in every city until the years of famine. Then you can provide food for your people. You can even sell the excess to neighboring countries to keep them alive and well and make you richer than ever from what you sell. That's perfect, cried Pharaoh, and all the people and wise men and servants cheered. But where shall we find such a wise man who has the Spirit of God and can pull this off? Everyone began to mumble and guess, but Pharaoh interrupted them. Joseph, you are the wise man. If the Spirit of God has shown you my dream and told you what to do about it, you are the only perfect man for the job. Pharaoh raised Joseph up and put his own royal ring on Joseph's finger. He also put a golden necklace around his neck and said, From now on you will be over my house and my people, and they shall do exactly what you say. Your word shall be the law of the whole land. Only on my throne will I be greater than you. Pharaoh clapped his hands and called for the royal dressers. They put magnificent clothes and golden jewelry on Joseph until he looked as fine as Pharaoh. From then on, Pharaoh had Joseph ride in a second fine chariot right behind his own and ordered all of the people in Egypt to bow down to him. Pharaoh gave Joseph a new name, Zaphnath-Paneah, which means one who discovers hidden things. Pharaoh also gave Joseph a beautiful wife named Asenath, the daughter of a priest. She was wonderful, very intelligent, refined, beautiful, and so kind. They soon loved each other, and in time they had 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. That spring, it was time for Joseph to begin his great work of saving food and grain through all of Egypt. This is not the end of the story. It's only the middle. Lots of exciting things will happen in the next story as Joseph saves the whole land of Egypt from starving, as well as his own family back in Canaan. Bye now.